So over these last two modules, we've been exploring conscious living practices that contribute towards our well-being, their impact on our emotional state, their impact on our physical state, and they really are important in terms of managing our well-being in the long term. Now, when it comes to making changes to those old habits and patterns that do not necessarily serve our well-being, it requires a lot of energy and focus, because these old habits and patterns, as we mentioned earlier on in the course, are around those old neural pathways that guide us towards that old behavior. And these pathways are well trodden. Now, when we start changing habits and patterns, it requires we start building new roads, new neural pathways towards new behaviors. And the ego operating system kind of looks at this and says, well, there's a lot of energy required for this new pathway. I'd rather we keep using the old pathways. And this is why it can be very difficult to make changes to these habits and patterns that do not serve us. So in this topic, I would like to explore the 4 stages of what creates a habit, and then we'll look at how our tools that we provided you, how they break down those stages that create this habit itself. And then I'll provide you with 6 tips that will reinforce and re-energize you as you make some changes to those habits and patterns that are not conducive to your long-term state of well-being. So let's look at the 4 stages that form a habit. The first stage is the bait or cue, which activates stage 2, the urge or craving. This then induces stage 3, the subconscious response to the urge or craving, which results in stage 4, receiving the reward from our response. This process then loops back on itself. The reward we get out of the response subconsciously associates with the bait or cue, and we repeat the cycle again and again as it becomes a long-term habit. For example, Jane passes by a coffee shop on the way to work daily. She smells the aroma of freshly baked muffins and ground coffee early in the morning. The smell of the muffins and the coffee is the bait, the cue. She then feels this urge to go into the coffee shop and have a coffee and muffin. Jane then satisfies her urge through her response by buying the coffee and muffin and feeling this pleasure, the reward from the sweetness and taste as she drinks her coffee and eats her muffin. The loop begins. The pleasure from the reward becomes associated with the smell of the fresh coffee and muffin. And every time Jane smells these aromas on the way to work, she goes in and has her coffee and muffin. And this becomes her daily routine, or what she might call it, her daily ritual. So let's explore these steps in more detail. The bait can be anything. When someone speaks abrasively, when we smell their food, when the phone buzzes, or the social media notification rings. As we become aware, we might notice thousands of cues a day that influence our urges, from music to weather. The urge is all about emotions. You will recall from emotional agility that our emotions induce our behavior towards pleasure and away from pain through our subconscious urges or cravings. The urge could be to become defensive when we hear that abrasive tone. It could be to eat that comfort food when we are feeling uncertain. Or it could be to open the social media application when we hear or see a notification. We then have that response to that urge or craving. This could be in the form of our thoughts or actions which motivate us to follow through on that urge. There is a subconscious equation at this point. Is the effort worth the reward? If the response is not worth the anticipated reward, then we do not follow through. The easier the effort in relation to the anticipated reward, the easier it is to form a habit. Eating a chocolate muffin is much easier than eating raw carrots and celery. Sitting at home watching TV is much easier than going to gym. Another factor determining whether we respond or not is our ability to respond. I may have the urge to buy the muffin and coffee every morning, but I may not have the money to do so. The easier the action required, the easier it becomes to form the habit through our thoughts and actions. And finally, we get the reward, that desired change in emotional state that is achieved. Interestingly enough, the reward is not the actual cake or the food. We do not crave being unkind to someone, and we do not crave our cell phones or our social media. What we do crave is the change in our emotional state as a result of responding to that urge. The reward of being right instead of wrong, the reward of feeling happy instead of sad, or the reward of feeling nothing instead of anxiety or worry. This process gives us a clue as to how to break a habit, or at least interrupt it. To break a habit, we are required to make the cue invisible, the craving or urge unattractive, the response difficult, and the reward unsatisfying. Creating a new healthy practice requires we make the cue obvious, the urge or the craving attractive, the response easy, and the reward satisfying. So let's look at how we've been working with these principles in some of the exercises so far. You will notice that these have been a blend between breaking the old habit and creating new practices. When you work with managing your hot buttons and becoming less reactive, you will be required to notice the bait or cue, making it obvious. Then be curious around the urge or hooks, making this urge unattractive as you ask yourself how your response would affect your long-term well-being, making the reward unsatisfying. Performing the deep breathing or deep relaxation exercises also help make your response more difficult as you settled your emotional state. Now, with the WHOOP methodology, you will recall that you first worked with your wish. Then the outcome was visualized and magnified, namely you made the urge attractive and the reward satisfying. As you worked on the obstacle, you raised your awareness around the cue and made the urge or craving unattractive. When you worked with the plan, you made the action around the new habit easier. So let's explore other ways to break habits and create new practices, such as going to gym, eating healthier, or getting better sleep patterns. Of course, these principles can be applied to any change you wish to make. Number 1, begin small. When starting new healthier practices, begin with small gestures or baby steps. This makes the effort easier in relation to the reward. Heading to gym and starting with heavy weights followed by an hour run on the treadmill will make the reward highly unattractive and the effort will not be worth the reward. Number 2, when you track it, you hack it. Changing practices requires consistency, so reward yourself for this consistency. Tracking each day that you complete a new practice on a calendar, in your journal, or in your workbook helps energize you forward to repeat the loop as you remind yourself of your repeated effort over the last few days or weeks. If you do not track it, there is a risk you'll forget your past efforts. Number 3, reward yourself periodically. Create milestones where you treat yourself as a reward for the consistency you've been putting in up to that point. Have a day to enjoy some comfort food or take that day off from exercise as you celebrate your hard work. Number 4, focus on the process, not the goal. This may sound counterintuitive. Yes, have a wish or goal. This sets your focus, but then let it go and focus on the actual process. Let each step of your process be the reward. If your goal, for example, is to lose 10 kilograms, focusing on the goal every time you go to gym will mean you have failed until you've lost 10 kilograms. And when you lose 10 kilograms, then what? Do you stop going to gym? Set the goal, then forget it. Focus on the process. For example, savor the good feeling you have after each gym visit and remind yourself of that the next day to energize you forward. Or savor how good you feel after you've had a full night's quality sleep. Let the rewards be found within the process and not because of achieving the goal. Number 5, eliminate your cues to unhealthy habits. As you notice the cues that stimulate your urges, begin to remove these. It could be removing all the comfort food from your kitchen countertops or turning your phone off at certain times in the evening before you go to sleep. Alternatively, make positive cues more obvious. Have your gratitude journal in an easily accessible area. Put fruits instead of sweets on your kitchen counter. Maybe even surround yourself with people who do not create drama or people who have similar goals and wishes as you. Finally, number 6, bad days are inevitable and the old habits will sneak back in. This does not mean you now stop the healthier practices. It's not about all or nothing. Understanding and accepting this helps prevent the feeling of failure and despondency that can undermine our new practices. Do your best to bounce back. And remember, it is usually through these times where we make mistakes that we learn how we can sabotage ourselves. And this gives you a better plan the next time you whoop your way through the process. So as we finish off this module, please work with your conscious living practices. Workbook 7 challenges you to work with them. And look at maybe breaking some of those habits and patterns that no longer serve you. You will be provided in the next module with additional information on habits and patterns that don't serve you around your personality type. You'll be doing some really exciting exercises, getting to know yourself. You'll work with personality types. You'll get to know your values. You'll get to know your character strengths. And as you do this, you form a healthier relationship with yourself. And you'll also explore heart intelligence along with loving kindness. And you'll see how it all connects together. Now, as we finish off, I leave you with a wonderful quote by Wayne Dwyer. You leave old habits behind by starting out with the thought, I release the need for this in my life. So I will see you in the next module. And until then, take care and stay aware.